Okay, so we're continuing Daf Yomi on Daf Amud Aleph. We are 5 lines in on the wide lines. Talking about a rather complicated case, but before let's just do a little bit, go a little back, explain how we got to this complicated case by the water. So the question of if you have a mavui with different things on each side of it, the question is what happens to the mavui. So we're talking about if it's initially talking about if it's bookended by Eruvin, then talking about if it's bookended by a karma Eruvin, then if it's bookended by a yachid and a Eruvin, and now we're going to, and then we're the question of what happens with the case where it could change. Let's say if it opens into a rechavah, which is an unused backlot, but in theory the person could always build a house there and then turn it into an area that's usable, which would make it a, meaning that it would be open into a rishut yachid. So the question is, so what is our exact story? So now we're going to the case of by the ocean, which I'm going to share a photo of because the way that it looks would very much depend and affect the way that you understand what's going on here. So the question is, where does the Rishut Harabim, is the Rishut Harabim, and how does that whole thing work? Okay, so if you see in the pair slide that I'm sharing with you, so beforehand we were talking about the cases where we have like before it was Rishut Harabim, Mavoi, then a Chatzer or a Rechavah, and then there's on the other side. Right, so basically the question is, does the Rechavah, the Chatzer become part of the Mavoi or not? That was a previous discussion, but now the case is where we have and there's a couple of options, and we're going to explain each option. Okay, so we have a mavoi that is surrounded by an ashba, a yam, and a Rishut Harabim. Right, so an ashba is a trash heap, a yam is the ocean, and Rishut Harabim is a Rishut Harabim. Which one it is we'll just call it a Rishut Harabim in this case. The exact Rishut Harabim will not make such a difference for which one it is, but it's Rishut Harabim, and that's right. That's going to create problems for us. So the question is, what do we do, and what exactly is the setup that we're talking about here? Okay, so there's the Ritva who says that it's Masa, as I'm reading on Paris 5, we quote the Ritva there. So number 77, Masa b'mavoi shetido achad kalal yam v'tido achad kalal ashba. Right. So what does it mean? It has one that it's a mavoi. One side of the mavoi is blocked up by trash, and the other side of the mavoi of the alleyway is stopped by the ocean. And there we go. So that's it. All right. So that's the mavoi that in theory should be mutter to use because it's got 2 walls on each side. It's got the water wall by the water, and it's got the pile on the other side. So therefore, that's a wall on each side. Then on the other hand, we have the sheets of Rashi when it says by Tzido. So that means that what happens is the mavoi, we have a Rishut Harabim going down the side, as you see here in the diagram. Then we've got the mavoi in the middle. Then on the wall, one of the walls of the mavoi is trash. One of the walls of the mavoi is ocean. And the third wall is the wall of the chatzers of the houses that are behind it. So right, so one of those is very hard to see where it's and like considered, but the Rishut Harabim isn't necessarily readily apparent, whereas it's very readily apparent in the case of Rashi. Okay.
In the case of Rashi, how do you even get into the mavoi if it's blocked off by water and a garbage dump on each side? There's other entrances, I guess.
Right. So the answer is, according to the Ritva, while the garbage is there, the only way in is through the houses that are on the sides. Like you can't it's completely blocked off alleyway because of the garbage and the houses and the water surrounding it.
So there's no other exit. Rabbi, there's no other exit on the other side of the chatzar?
For the Ritva, no. So we're gonna explain Korban Rashi. I just wanted to show you what we're gonna explain everything Korban Rashi. I was showing you what the different opinions of how the setup was. Okay.
I guess during the week you could access through the water as well. Like we're not
correct.
Seeing, right?
Correct. You could, assuming that the water is calm enough. Definitely.
Right.
It would be, so there are other cases where depending on the type of water, which came with the Shabbos, come up later as well. Question of like different kinds of waters. What status does water have? Is it a carmelite? Is it considered to be like which type of something kind of water, say a canal, might be different than an ocean.
Right. If it was just if it was a dock or something like that with boats on it, right? Maybe that's the way that people during the week access out of the Mavoy. But we're talking
Right. So there
about
could be
Shabbos,
ways that, right. So I'm not sure this particular level how it would have been accessed, but you're right. During the week, that's probably that would be the good way to access it. But generally, when you say that when you need an interim thing to access it, it would not be the same thing to your Shittarabim because it has to be easily usable, as opposed to one of the reasons why water and oceans are generally termed to be a karma as opposed to Shittarabim, even though everybody uses travels by boat, with the normal way of traveling back then, it still is for many things. It was different then because you need an equipment in order to do it, as opposed to a standard rabim of let's say of a large path of like a central highway, which you could go by car, you can walk on it, you can take a horse on it, whatever it is. So this is something you need to get a specific item in order to use. So therefore, because it's usable as well, that's why it gets downgraded from being a Tendler Shatarabim to being a Carmelite. Okay? So now we're going to reread the previous statement we had about the case of the Mavoy. So we're around, you see how we're going to compare the case of the Mavoy by the water and by the trash, in the case of Rechav is the mind of the building. Right? So Rechav Rad is Rechav Yafid, so Rechav Rad, nobody's in the building there because nobody's going to say unused, nobody's got rights to it. Whereas the Rechav of the Yafid, the back of the Yafid, he might decide to build a house there for somebody else to use. So, the Amar Rabin Bar Avada, Amar Yitzchak, Maasev Mavoy, Echad, Tzido Echad Kalel Yam, Tzido Echad Kalel Akfa, Uva Masat Rebbe, Lo Amar Ba, Lo Heter, Lo Yisrael. So this case happened for Rebbe, and you'd expected Rebbe to say, oh, you can fix it by doing this or by doing that, but he actually said nothing. So we're like, wait, why didn't he correct them? Why didn't he offer some options? Like, you don't need a left, you don't need a Korah, you don't need nothing. So of course, picture of Rippa makes sense that you don't need anything because, well, it's pretty much closed up. But according to Rashi, so we'll get there as to why you need that or not. So this question: so why didn't he say anything whatsoever? So for the Rippa's picture, is pretty clear. For Rashi, it's a little more unclear because it's right next to Rosh Hashanah. You should need a left, right? Even going to say that the water is the wall and the garbage is the wall, doesn't really equate even equate their case at all. So let's figure that out. So is there lo amar ba? Right, so why doesn't they say it's usher? You can't say it's usher to carry there because there are walls, as you see in the picture, right? So there's three walls. There's leveling, right? There's the garbage. There's the walls of the hut there, and then there's the walls of the water. So why didn't he say that it's allowed? So what's the question? Maybe somebody will come and take away all the garbage, and there goes one wall. Or on the other side, maybe the water will dump a whole bunch of sand, because basically in order for the water to be considered to be a valid machitza, sometimes there's water there. The fact that there's a slope of sufficient gradient or a step of sufficient gradient, it's either the step itself is 10 tvachim. Like let's say you've never been to a beach, let's say, where they have like stairs going down, and that's 10 tvachim, right? From from water level to where the water is, or that that is, let's say we're by a beach, but it's got a relatively slow. But if all of a sudden there's a due to the season change, a whole lot of sand flows in, then that would mean that it no longer that the other wall is no longer there. Because you can have a wall that's above ground, you can also have a wall that's simply because the level of the ground drops. There's also a way to make a wall. So it would be called a charitz, it would be called a ditch, but it would work the same way. If there's a steep drop, or a sheer cliff. So right, so it says so here in the picture here it shows a whole bunch of things being washed up onto shore. Right, when the tide comes in, and all of a sudden, and then I let everything shut up, and that's the problem. Okay, So
sorry. What's the problem with the water? That if the tide changes and the dirt will go down, so it won't be a proper wall. Is that what we're saying?
So beforehand, so it could be either. So the way that Rashi says is that it's going to dump a lot, right? Yalla hayam terton shel chol bavanim etzol slato kigen darko umitkater rochev hayam v'naaser karka karocha parza o yoter. Basically, you wind up having an issue where it went from being a steep beach to basically being a large open area that anybody can use. So basically, went from being it was a very steep slope leading into the water, whereas now it's a large empty expanse that you can use very easily. And we have to say that Yalla Tertona because it's not the water being there that creates the issue. It's the fact that there's a physical structure change. But for instance, let's say high tide versus low tide, so that doesn't actually affect the whether or not that part of that slip of the sand is valid as a wall. But if the tide were to bring in a lot of debris, it would change. So because for a wall, again, it has to be sufficiently steep. That means it has to rise 10 tefachim over 4 amot. Right, so that's the slope that it has to be at. It has to be steeper than that, or right, if it's on a slope, or simply a 10 tefachim gap. Let's say think like a small cliff. One of those, but then if it fills in, then it's no longer that wall has now disappeared. That's the problem. So now we've dealt with one wall's question of it's going to disappear or show up, like we had by the case of the guy something to build a house and put a house down on one side of the road. Maybe I should have shown it to the ashpa. Wait, but are we really worried about somebody's going to come and pick up the garbage? It grew to a mountain already. Somebody's going to come and clear out this mountain of garbage that's 10 tefachim tall, which is not short. It's a pretty big pile of garbage. Like somebody's really going to clear that out now. So didn't we teach that if you have basically there's a trash heap outside your window because clearly you've been throwing your trash out your window for a while, or that everybody in the whole area has been throwing their trash out the window for a while, and now it's a giant mountain. Therefore, it's considered to be its own Rishut Yachid. Therefore, you'd be allowed to throw it from your window onto that Rishut Yachid. As seen in diagram number 80. So you'd be allowed to throw it there, because you're not throwing from different types of Rishut, because it's considered to be from a Rishut Yachid to another Rishut Yachid or to a Makom Tor, depending on the exact shape of the garbage. But the point is, you're not be throwing to Rishut Rabin, so now it's no longer a problem. So Alma Shnei Shani Ben Ashpal Derabim Las B'Yafet. Rather, we should differentiate the difference between a person piled their own trash versus everybody's communal trash. Because if it's your own personal trash, if it's one person's let's say somebody's been doing construction on their house and they threw all of the refuse over into one spot, they might decide to move it because they want to use the space now. But if everybody's using it as a collective landfill, nobody's going to decide to move it and start use of it and to get use of it because why would they bother? Because it's everybody's garbage heap, it's going to stay the way forever. So we'll leave it the way it is. So Hasanami, Shani Ben Rachava Darabi Rachava Diafa. So here too, we distinguish between a backyard belonging to many people, where people won't build, versus that of a Yachid, where the person probably very well would build. And it also is a moment done. So Rabbanon line, that's like the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. So Amar Rabbi Yosef Ardimi Tana Chachamim Mosrin. So now we're going to try and figure out where exactly the Rabban Zain is. So we're quoting the case of Rabbi Yosef Ardimi. It says Chachamim Oster in our exact case. Amar Rabban Allah right? So meaning that you can't carry in our alleyway that leads to Rechava. Amri, or another version of the statement is Amar Rabbi Yosef Ardimi Tana Chachamim Matiri. Amar Rabban and Allah Kedivray Chachamim. Basically, so there's two different versions of this Brayta Zeva Rabbi Ardimi. So, but either way, we're going to paskin that you're not allowed to use it. The question is, are we paskin like a common that you can't use that's usher, or are we paskin against common with mutter, but you can't do it? So That's the question. Which one is the actual opinion of some? Because some can't really, how do they hold both? So we're trying to figure that. So we're going to figure this out. So now we're going back to the question: what is the status of a mavui into rachava? Right, the alleyway into the back lot. So Marimar pasuk lay l'sura. So Marimar had a very creative solution. How would he solve the problem of, let's say the Shema Yelet Tone problem? So so here's how he's fixing that. So that now we're in diagram number 81. So everybody sees how there's these little nets by each to the alleyway. So this is, let's say, if you're in Venice, right? You're not sure, is the water level going to drop or is it going to go up? Right? So then you never know what's going to happen. So because you never know, if all of a sudden you're going to be flooded with a whole bunch of things. So therefore, just in case, the wall below ends up being no good, I'm putting nets there. Nets work even though there's holes in them. They work because of lovewood. So therefore, that's a valid wall, and therefore you'll not have to worry about there being a problem of your mavui leading into a carmelis. You're covered. Right? So that's what he did, right? So he managed to solve that issue. So that explains how he solved the issue entirely. He didn't want to get into the Shema. That was his solution, which worked very well. So now we're going back to the case of what do we do about the Kirkin El Shem Mavoi? Like, what do we do? So, which is how we got the whole discussion of it in the first place. So so what was the case where they had a Mavoi Akum, as you see in diagram number 82. And what did they do? They rolled up some fabric, the buja, in the corner. So the question is, well, why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? Amar Rav Halo Karav Halo Shmuel. So Rav says it is neither like Rav or like Shmuel. Because basically, when you put a buja there, what is it basically? What are you essentially doing? You're putting a lefty in the middle, in between the two mavui, or the middle of the one large mavui, depending on if it's more like Rav or Shmuel. So why is it no good? According to Rav, who says that it's considered to be fulash, you need to have a real differentiation. You need to deal with a different type of fulash. Alati, it doesn't help. You need a sort of petah. So Shmuel the Amar Charta Kasatum, Hani Mile left Himalaya. So, and if you say according to Shmuel, that says it's already closed. So so that only works when there's an actual typo erected, not when there's this in between bundles there. But the problem is that what's a feature of a lefty? A lefty has to be able to remain in the corner and not be affected by the wind or blowing over. If it starts doing that, right? Just because you simply have anybody's ever tried, standing or in a that falls over, then we have problems. Then we can't use the mavui anymore. And we don't want people to put something that's not going to be that's very liable to fall down, because it's going to encourage people to do the wrong thing. So the other option is that what would you have done? If you stuck a peg through it and stuck it through the wall, then it's good, because then this bundle can't fall over if it's nailed in. Because once they're nailed in, they're more permanent, and that'll solve. Yuba Amar of Yirmiyah Barava Amarav Mavui Shenifrat Melo Chaser Shenifrat Chaser Kenegdo Chaser Wacher Mavui Ator. So now we're going back to a previous story. We're done with the Rachava cases right now. We're talking about a mavui that opens up into a chaser, and then there's a gap on the other side. Again, looking back at the here we go. Is this the here? So here. So we mentioned earlier. So the previous one. Here we go. So that's where's the case? Here we have the alleyway, mavui into a chaser straight through. If this diagram, except that it would have said right? Mavoi goes straight on through and then straight on into the oh, here, this is the one. Here we go. Here we got Rishut Rabin, Mavoi, Chatzer, Rishut Rabin, straight through. Okay, no, nothing blocking you. So the question is, what are we doing in that case? Okay. So, all right. So we said that the Chatzer is muter because it has 4 walls and it's fine. But the Mavoi is no good because it's considered to be perhaps Mavoi Mufulash, and therefore you need something to fix it. And you haven't fixed it. And the Chatzer doesn't work as a wall for purposes of allowing for usage of the Mavoi. So Amarle Rabba Barula La Rabbi Barabaye. Rabbi lo mishtateru hizo. So he said, so Rabba Barula, that's Rabbi, the son of Abaye. Rabbi, is this not part of Mishnah? Don't we, this is not in the Mishnah, as it says in the Mishnah. If you have a small chatzer, that was a larger one. There we say that the larger one is mutar and the smaller one is asur because the smaller one becomes like an entryway to the larger one, and therefore it would be asur to use. So that would be in the so that's diagram number that number 69 is that photo, right? So we've got the small cut there and the large cut there. So the large cut there you'd be allowed, but the small one you wouldn't be, which looks a lot like our case with the mavoi. We have the cut there, and then instead of the cut there, that's the mavoi is. Right, so it seems to be should be a direct analog. So Amarle, no. So as Rabbi says back, so Rabbi Barbai is the Rabbi says back, no. No. That case you could say because there really isn't a case of large groups of people using it. The only question of is the small cut there, a large cut there, and vice versa. Our case is we have to worry that the people from Israel are going to start using the alleyway as a cut through and include the cut there, and which means that even the cut there should be out there. So it's really not as embarrassing because if anything, we should be answering more than we are doing in the case that you quoted in the, of the cut there down in the cut Gedola, because it's even more accessible with the alleyway into the courtyard than the simply 2 courtyards. But wait, there's another Beit. But there Sharabin Latin Labazu, Biotin Labazu, or just Rabin Latuma, or just the Java. But don't we already learn that if we have a cut there, people happen to cut through, that there's Shutta Rabin for Tuma, but it's a Shudi after the Shabbos. So whenever we say that pair of Rishut, here we go. Let's go to here we go. Here's an example of the here 83 and 84. Right, you've got the Rabins on the side over here. You see it in 83 and 84. Should the Rabin. Then there's the cut there, and there's the entryway. They're one set of ways cross through it too. So in that case, we say that because you are going to be the Rabin cross through it, that then creates a Rishut Rabin L'Tuma, which is a good thing. Rishut Rabin L'Tuma means that we can make on the Tuma that is found in to be in Rishut Rabin, putting the original Hakel. Rishut the Shabbos, for Shabbos we want things to be Rishut because then they're potential less than carrying. But if Rishut Rabin for Shabbos, that means that you can't carry them at all. So the Rishut right. So we're saying we treat it as kula, even though it sounds weird that Scripture Raman says at the same time, the answer is that we're simply treating it as because it's not truly either. So we're treating it in the more makel fashion. Because okay. So but if they only stated it by the case of Shema, and you just said it's only where they are exposed in our case. Hani Mili, when the entrances aren't like opposite. But you might have said that if they're not across each other, that would also create a problem. Right? So the question is how directly accessible through makes it either Rishut Rabin or Shtiafi for Tuma or for Shabbos purposes. The question is which one would you push it? So why do you mention both for Shabbos and for Tuma? Well, the answer is because made a good svara both ways. That's why I had to point out that we're creating the cool in both cases. According to Rabba, who says that each side across the other side is considered to be asur. But according to Rabba, who says that it's a problem when it's straight across because people will use it as a thoroughfare, therefore you can't treat it like it's a yachid. What about Rav? How does he explain it? So if it's talking about someone they're not across the other, if that's the case, why do you need both cases? We're talking about why do you need the case both in Shabbos and the case in Sazetta? Why do you need the Mishnah and the Beit to go to the same exact case? They're both cases of it not being a case where the Rav would probably end up using it because it's not a direct, easily accessible throughway. Right? There's no way to get through this particular cut there easily. So why will we even say that it's accessible? Even Hatam Havamina Hanimi Lizrak. Well, Zelda Emelo. You may have said differentiate between using the area of Yizrika by throwing things to it, as opposed to Tiltil. Right? You may have said maybe for Zrika you're allowed, but Tiltil you're not allowed. Mashmalan, that you're allowed to both do Zrika and Tiltil in that area. Because generally Zrika, what we say is because you technically only actively did, you only did a only didn't have but only done enough. We didn't really put down the item. So generally we say in certain circumstances we say better to throw the item than it is to place it down directly. So to throw it outside of your Dalet Amod is preferred. So so in this case, we would say better to follow that fashion. Itmar. So this is one of those fun pictures that if you didn't have it, you'd be very confused as to what is going on. So if you have a mavoi that is shaped like a kandal, so that could mean a centipede, but as far as what that means, that doesn't really help you understand. Like, what does that mean? So again, diagram I chose was very helpful. Where basically where you have a whole bunch of entrances all over the sides, kind of like a centipede. That Amar Bait. So Amar Bait. So how do you fix it when you have this weird shape? So you see it here. So again, here we have a couple of options for when it says kanadal, what it looks like. So you notice how there's a lot of different ways into this housing complex, right? There's rooms all surrounding it, but then there's 1, 2, 3. So this picture has 7, right? There's 7 different entryways. There's one that's more primary, right? There's one that's less than the secondary, right? So question is, so what are you supposed to do here? Right? So again, so this is the first one here is the opinion of the Beit Yosef. Okay, that's number 85. 86 is the opinion of the Ritva and the Marshal. Okay, then we have an 87. That's according to Tosfot. So again, these are the diagrams. So I'll point out for each of them as we continue on the Gemara which one's referring to which. Okay. So when you have that complex mavoi structure with many entrances, so how do you allow the people in the housing complex to use their mavois? What needs to be done to fix all of these? So Amar Bai, Oza Tzura Petal Gadol. So Hanakulu Mishturu B'Achilakara. What you do is you take the biggest one. That one you fix with a large Tzura Petak, which is the strongest form of doorway and a way of blocking it in. Whereas for the other ones, which are really only secondary, so there you only need the heker of the lechi or and korah. You wouldn't need a full Tzura Petak.
Would that be at the end of it? Which is the biggest?
So that would be in the diagram here. Notice how there's one place that looks like it's the main entrance. So in 85, it's where the bed is. In 86, it's by the bottommost one. So that's where it says Lav Gadol. That's where every single house theoretically would be using using that area. And similarly in number 87, the same thing as well. That's the area that's again the main mavoi, both the secondary small mavois that less people have access to. So
Rabbi, would you call those individual spaces between the houses mavoi, or is it just the straight street that goes from the main? That's a mavoi.
So it's considered to be a mavoi because it's an alleyway, because it has an opening on both sides and there's no other walls surrounding it.
No,
So
but I
that's
meant
why
the individual spaces between the homes that lead out where you
Yes.
put those are mavoi too.
Yes, correct. It's a
Okay.
mavoi into a mavoi.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Okay. So, okay. So then we have Amar Le Rava, Kaman, Kishmuel, Amar Torah Tagas Tum. So Rava says this is according to the opinion of Shmuel. It says that a mavoi is considered to be closed. That's the case. Why are we putting a Torah on it at all? All you would need on each end is a lefty or a korah. You don't. What's the business with the Torah Beta anywhere? Oh, and how mavoi have been harda? And what about the case where we had a case in Harda where they followed Rav? So then, what are you doing this in between thing of where you use 8 Petach and Lefin Korah hybrid? Either you only Lefin Korahs, or you're going to need 8 Petachs everywhere. What is this, like halfway in between? Right, this is insufficient. So rather, you treat each individual alleyway set as if there are units. So on one side of the alleyways, where we have here that diagram number 87. So you have one side is being fixed, one side of the alleyway is being fixed with a sort of one side is being fixed with a lefty. That way, each individual mavoi or sub mavoi is fixed. However you draw it, so basically each individual subset is being fixed with a zero and a lefty or core combination. That's what you have to do to fix it. Okay? Okay, continuing on. Okay, so that's how they did it. They when they said they're covering both ends, they really meant they're covering both ends. When you were covering your bases, they actually were covering both ends, in the literal sense, not just the figurative sense. So Amar Kahana Bar Tachlifa Mishmei to Rav Kahana Bar Yumi Mishmei to Rav Kahana Bar Malkiyo Mishmei to Rav Kahana Rabbi to Rav Amar Lai Rav Kahana Malkiyo Hainu Rav Kahana Rabbi to Rav. So here's the following statement. The attributions were as listed. Mavoi Shetido Achad Arol, Shetido Achad Katzar. So if you have a Mavoi that one side is longer than the other side, right? So you've got an uneven one. So that's diagram numbers 89 and 90, right? So we've got an uneven Mavoi. So how would you measure it? What would you do with this? So if the gap between the two is less than 4 amot, so you're just going to you put a korah diagonally because it's considered to be close enough. It's not a real problematic gap. Arba amot, the one that it's 4. Rather, in that case, you're supposed to put the korah corresponding to the shorter end, right? So you won't be able to so you'll lose some space. So here, so now we have the above picture, right? So then one way, if you're doing the diagonal, you get this whole almost not quite this trapezoidal shape. Whereas if it's the gap is too large, as then you see in diagram number 92. So then you lose that whole extra space is just simply lost. Okay, so there'll be lost space, which is unfortunate, but that's what it has to be. Okay, okay. Rava Amar but Rava says either way, you simply do it for the shorter one, and the extra space is just simply lost. So no funny trapezoids. We only deal with squares and rectangles. We've never no diagonals going on. Similar to what we say, people don't build in. Why we have a problem when there's a pitfall that turns out, there's a gap on the corner. People don't build that way. People also don't build in not modern design notwithstanding, but from the Gemara's perspective, and even nowadays, if you walk into a building and it's got all sorts of weird angles, you're like, I want a piece of art, but is somebody actually living here? Because I don't want to know. So the Amat Tamadidi, but the Amat Tamadidi too. So I'm going to explain both why you can do that diagonal or you have to do it straight. Okay, so this is what Rav is continuing on to explain why it's what I say and why BAYT is said and why we are. Here we go. So, right? So Rav says, my opinion is you need to have a core positioned in a way that's recognizable. That'll remind you, and with the diagonal, it doesn't draw your eye as much, and therefore it's no good. Right? So what people argue? What do they say? Korah mishumai mishumachita. The way Korah works isn't that it's a reminder. Rather, the Korah reads as if there's a wall the whole way down. But also, and whether your wall is straight or crooked, a wall is a wall is a wall. So it doesn't matter how it's built. So, Amar Kahana, Holosh Mazda Kahana, Ema Bamilta. Right? So Rav Kahana leads with a joke. It says, since we're talking about halakha, the people, whose last, his name was Bar Kahana. So my name's Rav Kahana, so I just got, let me say something too. So, Haza Amar Maniach Kor Balakso, No Amran, Ela Shein Balakso, No Yoter Meser. When we say you do diagonally, it's only if when you end up doing a diagonal, it's still, the diagonal is less than 10. As I mentioned before, that there's a maximum limit to a Korah of 10 Amar. But if it's more than that, then you really can't put it. Because as we mentioned in the Mishnah, the maximum width of a case of using Korah is 10. And so once it's big more than that, the answer is you're stuck, and you have to do something, and you have to do it according to the Katzar. Because you had so again doing the math of the triangle, which and these diagrams show do the math and squares. Nope, they don't. Okay, never mind. So never mind. There's none of the things with the math, but basically you do as follows. So we got 10 on one side, right? So we got a little bit of the Pythagorean theorem here. So we got 10 squared, which is 100, and then the other side, which is so again you're going to be capped up. So we can't pass 121. 11 square. Right, that's 11. It's this side over here. That's got the 11. So then, if you had the gap over here being more, basically between 4 and 5, basically being 5 or more, that would create a problem being too wide, which will also help explain the why typically they say a maximum of 4, because the math would be somewhere between 4 and 5 is the square root of 21, which is a messy number, which we'll leave aside for now. That's square root, because yes, square root of the thing involving a 7 isn't fine. Now, back to our back to the Gemara, math point aside. So now we're question of, so now we figured out how to put up our Korah, where it goes, some of the dimensions of it. So now the question is, so now we have it up. Wait, so now we have the Korah up. Can we use the area beneath it allowed to use or not? Rabbi Yechia, Rabbi Yochanan, Amru, Mutar Shamet Tachat Korah. So Rabbi Yechia and Rabbi Yochanan said you can carry underneath the Korah, it's fine. Shmuel, Rabbi Shimon, Bar Rabbi, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Amru, Abdu Shamet Tachat Korah. Right, well, that's how we got Shmuel and Rabbi Shimon Bar Rabbi and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish saying that you can't utilize underneath it. So you said, why did you carry underneath it? Because you say that the wall, like, why would you say that you carry underneath it? Because you said the Beit is a wall, and the wall is at the very edge of the Korah, and that's fine. For hecker, like you're carrying the heck underneath, you're gonna lose the hecker, and that's gonna be a problem. That's why you can or can't use it underneath. Everybody believes that really it's because of the hecker. How come what are they arguing about? The question is the hecker for the people on the inside of the Mavoi? Which would mean that therefore you shouldn't be carrying all the way up to the edge of the middle bar for people who are outside of the Mavoi. That would be the difference. So that's okay. So the BAYT or sorry, let's try the other way around now. Maybe everybody thinks that really the Korah is a wall. The question is, which part of the Korah is actually the wall? Is it the innermost edge the part that creates the wall, or is the outermost edge the partly creating the wall. Whether or not the wall is created, like the Teva Hotel or however many spots are correct being in the end is the question, right? The side of it being larger or shorter, depending on whether you care about it being the perspective of the people in the courtyard, starting the mavoi, alleyway, or people who are in the being entering into the mavoi. So who's the hecker for? People inside or outside? So Amar and Amar Festa, Hakomodim Ben Hafayim Shatur. So on a similar note, when we talk about Korach, let's talk about Lefi. So everybody agrees that, everybody agrees that between the two Lefis, you can't carry like the two edges of the Lefi. There's no good. So, Rami Barakama asked for Festa. Na'ad shtei tidot b'shnei kotlei ha'mavoi v'chut v'hiniach kora al gabehan ma'u. What happens if you were to have done this interesting structure where you basically stuck two posts on the outside and you put a beam across? Right, picture number 94. Right, what does that work or not? Because so he says, according to people who allow you to carry underneath the underneath the Korah, that's fine. Normally you carry underneath this Korah, you got a problem. Now there's a gap between where your Korah wall is and your actual mavoi, and that's no good. But according to the opinion that Kodo Hapmim, i.e. people inside is what matters, then as long as it's up against the edge, that's good enough. Because that means that your the end of the zone is right at the edge, and we're good. So Rava Amar Livrei Oster Nam Yasur. No, everybody agrees it's problematic. Why? Begin on Korah al Gabi Mavoi V'Leika, because the Korah has to be on top of the Mavoi, not that it's exactly touching, that it has to be over to actually be able to either create the wall or to remind you. So Ife Rava the Barmat Nala Rava. So now Barmat says to Rava, if the beam was suspended in the air or pulled some way with strings, again, they're hanging from above or from the side. If it's less than 3 from the walls, then it's good enough. If it's less than 3 of the sides, that's fine. But if it's more than 3 off of one of the sides, that's a problem. So the question, admittedly, was a question of whether lovewood is done by 3 or by 4. So what's the case then? So my love, so what's the case? Drawn away. It's drawn away from the alley wall. Rather, it's pulled away on the outside, but it's hanging towards the inside. Okay. Right. So the question is where exactly have we placed the? Right, here's Meshucha means slightly off. Right. Okay. So again, these are various options of how it could be hanging or how to the side, whether by means of a small beam or a wire. Right. So that's the question, which one it is. So low. No, you got that wrong. Look, beam. Both of them are talking about where it's where the cross beam was suspended over the inside of the alleyway or was mentioned before. It's no good. When we say Meshucha is pulled, it means that there's a gap on only one side of the beam. Or say if it's hanging, so to speak, that means that it's hanging. That means there's a gap on each side of the beam relative to the wall. That we do, right? So you may have thought that only one side do we still allow, but on both sides it's no good. Mashmalan, that we still allow it. Okay, so we'll look one little passage, and then we'll continue from after the next mashmalan to next time. So Ashi Meshucha I'm happy to get that's pulled and hung at the same time. You're going to not say Hedot Akamot. Basically, what you did is you stuck in these interesting holes that are less than 3, which puts it both above it and to the side. Again, this is diagram number as you see 98, where you have these weird angles here. So it's basically the 3 on the diagonal. It's a 3 up, but it's also while at the same time being close to the edge. So. So either you say that it's like lavud, or you say that it's basically we simply squish it and say that it's we lower it to the level where it should be. You can only do one. You can't both stretch it and push it down. You can both stretch it out and push it down. So even if it's even if it's above the level, both in the horizontal and vertical directions, that would still work in the end of the day. Okay, so just a quick recap. So we were talking about cases of a wall being there disappearing by the case of the water or the garbage. We were also talking about we had interesting cases of crooked mavoi, with many different entrances. Which ones what do we have to solve? And also we started discussing when we are placing our lefi and our korah, how much of it is usable area versus how much of it do we treat as being unusable. Okay, so that is it for today. If you have any questions, you're welcome to ask the class now. And if everybody needs to go, you're welcome to leave now as well.
Rabbi, a few dapen before we had this concept of klusha, right? I think that's where the korah was diagonal and above and below, and we said it was okay because part of it was covering. Were we back then using the concept of lavud as well?
Yeah, yes. In the sukkah we were talking about, we were using lavud because the sukkah is not necessarily for the saf. There can be gaps, right? There can be gaps in the sukkah, but we consider that to be a full wall as soon as the gaps are small enough.
And in regard to a maboi with a korah, where it was, let's say, above Eser Amos and below, let's say above Eser Amos, but it wasn't covering completely, but we said part of it was because we split it. That was klusha, right? Because I'm trying to understand.
Means like a part.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm following fully. Which exactly? Let's see if we can find the. Yeah, let me see the diagram. You're referring to the diagram. Go back up so we can all be clear as to where we're referring to. This case, Mikshat,
yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay. So I'm not sure if it's kosher or not, but then the question here is whether or not you have a sufficient amount of the wall is within the valid area. That's the main question, right? So for the purposes of sukkah, right, you need to have enough of the right. So the question was, can we compact all the stock into infinitesimally small, very thin sheet or not? Right, so that was the question. Right, so that was the question more in terms of the right. So for that was more in terms of for the amount of shade blocks. Can we do that all as a singular unit? Whereas when we're talking about it for purposes of korah, it was a little bit different because there, right, so there only like lavud works much better because then as you make your stock out of lavud, that's not a valid stock. Whereas if you were to make your right, so Parish helps you for your sock, but lavud would not. So that's why there's slightly different usage.
But in the case of korah, it would help, right?
Yes, we would be using crucial. We'd be using the concept of lavud only. The concept of smushing it down would be unnecessary because lavud is sufficient. So it wouldn't come out.
Okay, so I guess my question is just to understand the concept of klusha. It doesn't involve also elements of lavud. That I guess is my main question.
That's done specifically to fill in the gap for shade. It's not connected to the concept of lavud.
Okay, thank you.
Shkoyach, Rabbi. Thank you. Have a good day, gentlemen. Take care. Be well.
Good day, everybody.
Shkoyach.
Yeah.